Hello, my lovely book lovers. Welcome back to Procrastinate with Books. In today's video, we'll be going through all the books that I've read this November, so it will be a complete reading monthly wrap up. The old school style, starting off with the least rated books, moving on towards the end of the video, I'll be discussing the books that I enjoyed the most and probably also rated the highest as well. There were some books that I felt a little in between, but considering November was actually the month of experimentation for me, I think it went on pretty well considering the types of experiments related to different genres that I did. I'm really excited to share those with you. The first book on our list is Gift, which was a novella, and I somehow had certain different set of expectations from this book, which it did not convey. The book is actually a retelling of a very classic tale. If you do remember in childhood, you must have read it somewhere down the line about a couple story where the wife gets a Christmas present for her husband by sacrificing her hair, and she gets him a wristband for his watch, and the husband actually sacrifices his watch and gets her a comb, silver comb, and they both sacrifice what means a lot to each one of them, and the gifts are totally in the opposite direction. And then it's just a story of love and virtue, and in this one it's actually a twisted tale of the same story with a different retelling format. I would have liked the story more had it ended in a different way, or the story was a little more extended and it gave us a bit more content, but it abruptly ended. And you all know that I'm not really a fan of abrupt endings, so that's why it was a pretty average read for me. Next on our list is The Power Unbound, and this is the finale book in the Binding series. I think the last binding is the correct name for the series, and I think the overall series is pretty good. Everything possibly good that you would expect from a fantasy series is present in here. There are magical elements, ancestral magics, portals, and a lot of key artifacts, and so many other details that have been mentioned in the book that make it a great story overall. Even the characters are developed pretty well, so you would definitely enjoy the story. I think to best enjoy this overall series, you should probably read them one after the another, because there are a lot of interlinked elements, stories, patches that would be covered with not a lot of background information provided in the current book that you would be reading. Hence, it's recommended that you read the whole book in a binge format one after the another. Hard luck for me that I actually read the last book after almost a 1 year gap when I read the second book last year. And that's why, because of this gap, I was missing a lot of things, a lot of elements, and I wasn't able to recall a lot of aspects of the story, which actually soured my experience for reading this book. And I don't think it's really the problem with the book, just with the timing of when I actually read this part. So if you want to enjoy it, please read it in a series. My next book is another Freida McFadden story. Yes, I read two books by this author this month, and this one is a complete story. It actually follows the aftermath story of The Housemaid, and this one is The Housemate Secret. So there are things happening down the line almost a decade after from when the first crime was committed, and all the things that happened thereafter, what kind of person she became after the things that happened. I really don't want to present any kind of spoilers for book one, because book one is really good. It also has some gruesome, goosebumpy moments that once you read them, you will literally have goosebumps. There are elements like that in that book. Sadly, those kind of elements were missing in this part, and especially when a reader once has a taste of blood, they really want it more and more, which I couldn't find in this one. But the story is basically an aftermath of encountering another family in need of her help and the actions she takes, but somehow things don't fall in the right place. Instead, she becomes a kind of victim in this story. So that's that. A pretty decent mystery thriller story, but I still like the book one better. Next up is the 12 Days of Murder, which is a elite murder mystery society, and within that they actually play different games and act like different characters based on the scripts they are provided, where a person would be murdered and all the rest of them would happily be solving the murder mystery, and who is the actual murderer, they'll be finding that. And this is the group of very niche people in the society who are pretty rich and they can afford some fashionista games where they can rent a mansion, play characters, rent different things. But all the people in this group are actually hiding different things. Some of them are misfits in the group, some of them are simply faking to be the kind of person they are, where others have even deeper hidden secrets and ulterior motives to actually kill somebody within the group, and that is where the story is headed. I think if you're making any kind of TBRs for your Christmas or December season where you actually want to read murder mysteries in a snow setting, I think this would be a good book to add in the list. This one is the second book in the trilogy, and just like book one, this also ends on a cliffhanger. So, first things first, note it down over there. The overall series is a pretty good elemental mix up of all the fantasy things that you could possibly come to your mind. I would say let's include the things like soul bonding, powers, magical uses, negotiation strategies for kingdoms, rulers, betrayals, love triangles, etc., etc. All those things are element. I think they have been bombarded into the overall series, but you will get a taste of each and every element in phase by phase form. So, firstly, there would be a love triangle situation, and then moving ahead, there would be other powerful negotiation, pacts, betrayal, revenge, and all those elements entering into the story, which adds to a lot of emotional flavor to the background mix as well, which actually makes the story pretty interesting. And that is why I actually liked reading this one. What I did not like was the way protagonist was dealing with a lot of aspects in her life, and the way that she was, not growing up from her mistakes, which is a really pissy thing to read about. So that's why overall story pretty good, book two okay. Our next book is a tale of conflicting dream happening in a particular island society that is supposed to be under colonization, and the empire is trying to rule them, and the people there are trying to resist, and there is also a resistance group. So there are different angles mentioned into the story. There is also a specific element of mermaids that's been introduced into the story, and they play their own role from time to time, though I felt that the mermaids part was a bit added and it did not really, mix up with the overall story pretty well. There were elements where it was playing a role, but otherwise, I don't know why it was even there in the story. But overall, the plot of the book is pretty good. The way the narration is carried out, moving from one perspective to other, there are multiple perspectives and different angles being covered for the story. I think it felt a little confusing, at least for the first half of the book, but later on, as the story grows on you and you get familiar with a lot of aspects, names, which are pretty peculiar in this case, I think post that you will be able to enjoy the story more, but you really need to give the book your undivided attention. Specifically in this case, an audiobook would not be the best choice for it. I think reading a physical book would be more likely to be enjoyable case. The House Guest is another mystery thriller book that I read. Now, you must be wondering why I've read so many mystery thrillers. It's majorly because I have been traveling to a lot of different places recently, and because of that, I couldn't spend a lot of time around divulging into the deeper fantasy books, non-fiction books, etc. And that was the very reason I decided to go with mystery thrillers a lot this month, and that's why I've read it a lot of different types of mystery thrillers. Talking about this one, it's majorly around a convolution plot that has happened against the legitimate inheritance of a particular mansion house that's there, and the people who are living in the house currently are introduced to a new guest, optionally called as relative to them, and then as she enters their life, things change very drastically. They are having different conflicting problems with each other, and there are a lot of different other things happening in the story as well, and things are obviously not what they appear on the outside. And even though you may think you have discovered the true killer and their motive, there are layers within layers of the story, which actually makes it pretty fascinating and diverging into read as well. Next up, I read Homo Sapiens for my non-fiction November tag. Now, I wasn't specifically doing a book bingo TBR, but this is something that I really wanted to try this November because last time a lot of non-fiction books were recommended during this tenure, and I thought, why not try this one? It basically talks about everything possible related to human beings in general, not just Homo sapiens. It also starts with the journey of human evolution from Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, how just one species of human beings actually survived the earth for a later stages, and how there is a possible chance that few of us may carry traces of Homo erectus genes as well. And there are a lot of historical facts mentioned, and it's a pretty fascinating book to read. But the way the overall theme and the narration is carried out from one point to next point, I think there is a lack of a bit of connectivity in there, which makes me think that whether I'm actually reading a single book or reading different topics or essays or discoveries on different things. So maybe I'm talking about Homo sapiens species at the moment, then maybe we are talking about the kind of civilizations that went through and the kind of colonization that happened at a later stage. It actually discusses a lot of different aspects related to human beings, and that's what makes it a iffish book. Now moving ahead to another manga classic that I read. I actually started this on Halloween and I really wanted to finish it on the same day. But because of some additional plans that came into my life, I had to deprioritize this book a bit and it took a long time to finish this one. This one is actually a manga adaptation of the classic tale of Frankenstein, and the good part is all the elements of stories, the characters, introductions, everything is conveyed pretty well. The main plot remains the same, so there won't be any changes still there. But for people who actually do prefer to read a little less wordy kind of a book and would prefer a little illustrated version of it, I think it's a great chance for people who have not read Frankenstein yet to read this in a manga format, because it's illustrated quite beautifully, and considering the depictions and the character portrayal that have been carried out in this book, I think this one deserves a chance. One of the books that perfectly fits the title that appearances are deceptive would be this book, because from the face of it you might think that it is a children's book, and to a certain extent it definitely is. But considering the plots, themes, and the overall messaging from the story, I think it's really good for adults as well, because the messaging is pretty deep. It's about life in general and the endurance one has and the attitude that you keep towards living your life is what makes it or breaks it at the end. And it's a pretty short story, pretty priced one as well. But considering the story and its messaging, I think I'm happy that I gave it a go. The Curse of Penryth all appears to be a mystery thriller book, but it actually has a lot of theme plots of historical fiction as well as some minor inflections of magical elements as well. But it's not really a fantasy, it's majorly a historical mystery fiction kind of a mixture story that's presented to you. So if you're actually looking to try something in historical fiction but that does not add to the elements of World War zones, especially World War II, because we have had a lot of those, so I think this would be a good experimentation for you guys to try in the historical mystery category. And considering things are mostly kept on the interesting side in this book, I think this would be a good book that you would probably try to solve the detective story yourself as well, because a lot of elements and clues that are there related to the story are played out in front of you and explained one by one. So I think it would be a good book to play detective mystery as well. Now, if you are in a mood of a Chinese classic tale, this is not essentially a classic tale, but it has a lot of Chinese yin yang elements to it that makes it a perfect composition, at least from my perspective, since I don't have a lot of diversification reading experience in Chinese culture. I think I would still consider this a good factor, at least from my reading experience. The story here is about an empire ruling the kingdom where there are different fighters there in the society, and different people are actually trying to claim the throne through their inheritance process. Since the actual king does not have a real heir, the next four people in line are trying to make their proposition the strongest, and stuck among them is this lovely little girl. She's not just a girl, I would consider her a woman, considering the pace with which she's growing and her character improvisations that have been made into the story. I think it's a really interesting plot to read. And what's more interesting is that there's a time reversal element that's added to the story, which makes it pretty tricky. So, if you're in a mood for Chinese kingdom stories, magical stones, time reversal kind of elements, I think you can add this to your TBR. Next book actually came as a surprise to me. Lessons in Chemistry was my experimentation read for this month because it was a book choice pick for BOTM for a book club that we have on Instagram. And for that very reason, I thought let's go with it and just have a blind dive into the story and find what this book is about. And I actually enjoyed it. I thought it would be more of a romance and in a contemporary section, but it was happily not a pure romance. It had so many different elements to it. The narrative of the story overall was sung in a chemical language, which actually added a bit more novel element to the story. And considering the overall aspects of even coffee making that was described in the book was pretty fascinating wouldn't be the right word, but it was one step above fascinating, and I'm astounded at the way the author has been able to carry on with so different strong feminist elements into the story without even offending a lot of people. Our next book is another book that I actually read on the same theme plot of a murder mystery solving on the Christmas to New Year theme line, but this one has a slightly different plot. So, in this particular story, there is a beautiful mansion that's out on the stake for inheritance, and to actually inherit that house for next contested period, you would have to find all the keys that would be provided to you in form of different puzzles, solve those puzzles, collect all the keys, find the mystery room, unlock the room with the correct key, and then get the ownership of the house. But the stakes of game are elevated to a very high level when it's known that your life might also be at stake and people might try to kill you just to grab and get hold of that key and actually win the game and inherit the house. And that's why few of the people are really dicey when it comes to inheriting the house or playing this game, but once you're in, there's no going out. And now moving ahead to my last, final, and favorite book of this month that I read so far has been the Do Bookstore. It's a beautiful tale of a delivery man who actually delivers books from a bookstore individually to few of his customers because they do prefer a personal delivery. There, while delivering the books, he actually finds an unknown companion in form of a very little sweet cute girl who is a little mischievous but very crazy when it comes to books. And that's where they both bond with each other about different stories and different kinds of books. And I think this has been a very long awaited books about books kind of a story for me because within the theme of books about books, I do personally like books about bookstores a lot, and this one had the perfect element of delivering books related to a personal experience and taste to different people. And while he's actually delivering those books, different aspects of life of his customers are also portrayed in front of you so that you get an understanding of why he's doing certain things for certain customers and what kind of bonds are they establishing with each other. I think it's a beautiful tale overall, and that's why it made me a little senti as well, considering all the humane touches that this book actually adds. From a book lover's perspective, I think it was simply wow. And with that, all the books that I've read this month, I think they have a pretty decent coverage from genre perspective. We have covered novellas, mangas, classic stories, converted in other forms, contemporaries, historical fictions, fantasies, mystery thrillers, and even non-fiction this month as well. And though we did not like it a lot, I'm really excited to know what amongst these books are you going to pick next, or if there are any other books that you have already read in past and you felt something, please let me know in the comments down below, especially about lessons in chemistry. I'm really eager to know what are the thoughts of other people reading this book and how did they find it, how did they venture into the story, and what was the key takeaway that they felt once they completed the story. I'm really excited to know your thoughts. So Let me know down below, and I'll catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBRs long. Goodbye.